Hello and welcome to the next episode of the New Workspace. Today we're going to be talking about designing employee experiences and how to operationalize your employee experience strategy. My name is Safi Obadilla, Field CTO at Citrix, and I'm joined today by Mark, Shweta, and Chris. Thanks guys for joining the podcast, and I'll get each one of you to introduce yourselves. Mark, let's start with you.
Hi everybody, my name is Mark Curtis from Fujitsu Global, and my responsibilities cover innovation around digital workspace solutions. My focus is developing technology and solutions to support and hopefully enhance the workplace experience. And over the past couple of years, I've had a keen interest in solutions to support in particularly safety and well-being in the workplace, which has a really interesting link with the current COVID pandemic. Thanks, Safi.
Thanks, Mark. Shweta?
Thanks, Safi. My name is Shweta Bandi, and I lead the Employee Experience Technology team at Adobe, and I'm really excited to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks for joining us, Shweta. And last but not least, Chris?
Great. Thanks. Chris Bocci. I help lead an advisory function within Citrix that supports engagement with executive teams at Citrix clients to help them understand and embrace employee experience as part of their business strategy. And likewise, I am thrilled to be a part of this panel with this star-studded group.
Thanks, Chris. So let's get started. I guess for a long time now, employee engagement has really been seen as the measure of how happy an employee is working for an organization. But in recent years, we've really seen the rise of focus on employee experience, really that journey that an employee takes within an organization and making sure all of the employee touch points that they face are positive, be it physical, workplace, the interactions with tools and technologies, the way the processes that they have to work through, the communications across the organization. So all of these different touch points matter. But before we get into how to design and operationalize employee experience, I thought we could start by really doing a level set and defining it. So Mike, let's start with you. How would you define employee experience?
For me, employee experience covers a real wide range of topics, and that can be anything from employee engagement to company culture, our ability to achieve, how we develop, recognition and reward. But recently, work-life balance and safety at work, especially with COVID-19, have become particularly important. And then looking at the investment in IT and technology and tools to support that. But actually looking forward, even perception of company brand linked to topics such as sustainability and global responsibility have been becoming ever more important. But when I look at my role around creating digital technology, my focus is to help individuals digitally navigate their organizations in a safe, informative, and engaging way.
And I think that's the interesting thing. It's not just one thing. It's not like if you just fix this one thing, employee experience is magically going to be awesome. There's so many different facets to it. Shweta, your perspective?
And very similar to what Mark is saying, right? And I'll maybe even start with an analogy that I've used in the past of, picking an ice cream flavor and depending on what your mood of the day is, your ice cream flavor might change. Very similar to where your employee is in the journey of their own, the moments that matter for them, right? The experience that they're looking for perhaps is going to be different. But I think of employee experience as almost, very much in terms of the physical workplace experience, the digital workplace experience, the tools and the technology today that is available to us in terms of the remote work that we have, or even when you're over, in your physical space, and then consolidated with, how you're feeling, the overall well-being, the compensation, the benefits. So it is that full package. And it's even more so a people experience because in today's workplace, right, it's more than just the employees. So that's how I think of the overall experience.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Chris, I know you've done some research in this space recently. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, certainly. So, unsurprisingly, I'm going to keep adding to what the group said. I operate off a very simple definition of employee experience, and that's simply the sum of employees' perceptions of their experiences working within an organization. And if you're familiar with the definition of customer experience, this is actually just a slight reflection of that. Like Shweta said, we generally think of culture, physical space, and digital space as inputs into shaping that experience. But I also want to pick up on one word that everyone's shared here, and that's journey. And when we're talking about employee experience, there's a relationship. We often talk about engaged employees, and engagement is the outcome of a continued positive employee experience. And that journey, sometimes, historically, I think we've talked about, somebody's journey within an organization, and it's a very wide angle view. And I think what's different now, and why this topic is so important, in shaping, hybrid work, is I think what we found over the last, recently, is employee experience is also daily journeys for employees. And so those moments throughout the day that really have an impact on somebody's experience in an organization.
Yeah, and I think, Shweta, I like the way you framed it around the moments that matter. I think we all look through those touch points throughout our daily work lives, as Chris said, and I guess making sure that they're positive and not negative, and we're not getting in the way of employees doing their best work. And so, Chris, sort of staying with you, I mean, you touched on something there around why employee experience is important. And I wanted to sort of dig into that a bit more. I mean, why do you see employee experience is important, and how does it bring value to the organization?
Yeah. Going to zero back in exactly on that point, where engagement is the outcome of a continued positive employee experience. And so it's important because if I want to develop an engaged workforce, I need to continually work at and focus, on that employee experience from both that wide angle, looking at the journey throughout their time with an organization, as well as their daily journey. Now, engagement matters to companies because of a handful of really big business benefits. I mean, there's a lot of studies that point to the impact, engaged employees deliver better customer experiences. Engaged employees are much more likely not to leave. So there's a huge retention issue. That's probably one of the #1 business benefits that organizations tend to focus on is employee retention. There's also a big business impact in terms of attraction of talent. And if I'm creating a great employee experience, and especially, we found that the role of technology is one of those attractive things that, somebody looks for. Hey, if I have the tools I need to get my work done, it's an important part. So attraction of talent. But the #1 benefit, and I almost feel like I should lead with it sometimes, is discretionary effort. And discretionary effort is, taking on responsibilities. You're doing work outside of one's normal role, and so that's the going above and beyond. And that's the holy grail for companies as they're looking to increase productivity. It's unlocking engaged employees so that they're more likely to expend that discretionary effort. And when you think about discretionary effort, that's also where innovation happens.
No, that's true. And I think that notion of getting the employees to a point in time where they're so positive about working for an organization that they're willing to go above and beyond more often. And I think that's the difference between a good employee experience and a great one.
Yeah.
Shweta, your thoughts, really, what's the importance of employee experience and what does it bring? And I'd be interested in your perspective because of your role as well at Adobe.
Yep. And also Adobe being in the world of creating digital experiences, right?
Exactly.
We're in the business of that. I also feel like today's employee is used to getting that consumer grade experience, right? They are using DoorDash and they're using Amazon, where there is a one-click, mentality, right? And so, they expect that same experience at their workplace, right? They're used to that kind of experience as a consumer, and it's behooving on us as technology providers to provide them that same experience. And so I completely agree, Chris, with your points around, why it is critical. But then I also feel like overall your talent strategy is around employee experience to be able to attract, acquire, and then keep them engaged and keep them working. The other piece, I think, also is that the employee is looking to get back to doing the work that they want to do. And it's really critical that we allow them to do that, right? They're not looking to get, spending 15 minutes figuring out where they have to enroll for benefits or figuring out what's on the menu in the cafeteria, right? There's no time for that. We're moving so fast. And so it makes it even more important and critical to provide them that experience so that they can go back to doing what they're really, we've hired them to do, basically.
No, that's right. And I think you raise an important point around technology and just the consumer approach and experiences we have outside of the workplace, and how easy it is to get directions, to order food, to listen to music, all those things are very seamless and intuitive experiences whereas when you look in the workplace, unfortunately, in many cases, we're still lagging there in terms of the experience. Chris, you touched on customer experience. For a long time, organizations are putting a lot of investment and focus on improving customer experience, and yet the employee experiences and their experience with technology is typically lagging. And I think, this whole notion of employee experience is really good to sort of get people thinking about, well, why do I need to deploy this new tool or technology? Let me think about that first. Let me actually talk to the people rather than it just be the IT department thinking this is some cool new whiz-bang technology we have to have, and really getting to the crux of why we need it. Mark, from your perspective, obviously Fujitsu, you guys use a lot of these practices internally, but also work with a lot of your customers around this. How do you see that employee experience is important and brings value?
Really, to build on everything that's been discussed by Christian Sweater, focusing on some of the digital aspects and the digital experience, for me, it's about freeing up time, and that enables focus on activities that individuals want to do, which was Sweater's point, but also the activities that provide the best value to the business. So utilizing your talent in the best possible way for the business. And it's about things like automation to try and take away the admin and the mundane tasks, which free up time. So that's really, really important, but also to help us navigate the workplace, that digital environment, as easily and as comfortably as possible. I think this also links into creating a safe and comfortable working environment. So especially with COVID, understanding that the workplace is safe, we're not going to get overcrowding, people are well spaced out, I can get access to the facilities that I need when I'm in the office. That also is a great way to save time. And then I think one final point that I would like to mention here is about supporting diversity and inclusion in the workforce, which I think is absolutely key to generating a great employee experience for everyone. And at Fujitsu, we like to use the phrase, be truly you. And that is really about being comfortable in the workplace, and enabling everybody to fit in and work in the way that they want to. And digital technology can really help us do that.
Yeah, and I really like how you frame that, Mark, being able to work the way you want. I think in today's world with, the diversity of people, the diversity of devices, the diversity of spaces that we're working in, I think it's really important that we're able to build these experiences that bring together people and not, I guess, negatively impact people because they're working from a remote location or they're not working on the right device. And that sort of brings me to the next question around, obviously, over the last 12 months, the world has been impacted with this pandemic, and we've seen a big shift to remote working for a lot of people. It's one thing to be able to control and manage the journey that an employee has when they're in a physical location like an office, and you can control a lot of the communications, the tools, the technologies, and all those interactions. But when they're now working from home, that's a whole nother beast there. And so I wanted to get that perspective, and Mark, we'll start with you because we were talking on it before we started around how has employee experience been impacted, or how do we need to think about employee experience a bit differently now that we have so many people working remotely?
Yeah, and it's a really interesting question, Safi, and I think we actually have to think about the role of the individual as well. And so I think at a very broad level, we can kind of divide things into office-based workers and frontline workers. And I think they probably need some different things. So some of the challenges facing office workers is that they're now working from home. So companies have had to enable remote access really quite quickly to allow individuals to do that. So changing systems and allowing people to access systems remotely. But I think we've also seen when we've been involved in calls, people need to be able to manage the home environment and be able to manage the personal interruptions that we get within that home environment, and learning to cope with that culturally on calls has been something that's been very, very interesting, because I've seen a great acceptance of that, so that if a child walks into the room, then actually everybody's quite comfortable with that. And I think we've seen it all happen, and actually perhaps have some sympathy with the fact that we're having to do homeschooling during these difficult times, and we're all in an environment that we're all getting used to. I think some of the real issues with home working have been around isolation. So this has also been an issue for many. And I think we've seen a need for a focus on employee well-being and the need for remote support. And we need to develop better mechanisms and technology to support well-being in the workplace. And at Fujitsu, we've developed some apps to help us do that, so that we can track well-being and we can communicate in a slightly more informal way. And I think we need to be careful around burnout, because I think as home users adapt to a new work style, they need to learn to take breaks and not work excessive hours. So we need reminders that we don't need to be on calls all day long. And I think coming to the frontline workers, I think the issue has really been about safety. And I think we've looked at the development of innovative solutions to support safety at the front line, with technologies such as digital alerting, and body-worn cameras to help prevent the escalation of antisocial behavior in difficult situations, for example.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think that whole focus on digital well-being and avoiding fatigue, that's really important as well. It's actually the topic of another upcoming episode of this podcast. Shweta, from your perspective, how has employee experience been impacted due to this pandemic?
I agree with everything that Mark said. I mean, the lines have really blurred between sort of your workplace and your home, essentially, right? A lot of times, we've had lots of young parents and young mothers where the kids, and because they're staying home as well, right? They're crying in the background, and it's okay, right? It's okay to kind of pause a meeting and go back to them and figure out what they need. And so I absolutely agree that the empathy, the patience, the acceptance of the culture has grown significantly with what we've all been facing over the year. But I do feel like the Zoom burnout, as it's being called, or the screen time that we and the entire families, I think, are now spending on, is a real concern. And that does impact the employee experience, right? We've tried to adopt a lot of, best practices and ways around, like, asynchronous learning, right? Or asynchronous time that you can spend on, right? So you don't have to be on the device. We're encouraged to do more talks and more walks, and rather than having to be always on a device, right? So there are certain ways and tips and tricks that are sort of creeping into that overall employee experience and that overall well-being as we talk about.
No, that's right. And I think that whole talks and walks is, I like that, because it's really important. I think we end up, and the way I've been sort of thinking about it is, one of the best things about working from home has been we've been able to move away from that notion of presenteeism, where we were expected to be in the office, and that's how we were judged as to how well you're working. And now we've sort of been able to move away from that, and people can work from other places as well. But I feel we've almost entered this world of digital presenteeism, where we're always trying to make sure that we're available. We don't want the perception to be that we're not working because we're not visible. So I've heard stories where people are worried if their team's status says offline or away, because they don't want their boss to think that they're actually not working, and sort of creates a lot of anxiety for people as well. Chris, I see you laughing there. What's your thoughts?
It's fine. I think this is the why this topic is so fun is because of exactly that. I mean, this is both something, you can talk about strategy for an organization, but it's also things that we internally feel. And, I'd lie if I haven't felt that way sometimes myself. I'm like a little bit worried to take those important breaks, or that notion of presenteeism is an important one. I wanted to build on what Mark and Shweta had just shared. A lot's changed, but what I want to add is perhaps some of the okay, so what do we do about it? And you alluded to some research that Citrix conducted, and I know we're sharing it after this webinar, but we essentially, performed a quantitative study of nearly 800 leaders with EX-focused executives within IT, HR, and real estate, and incorporated a lot of leading cognitive science and business research to understand the behaviors and activities of the most advanced organizations, and also interviewed some thought leaders and practitioners across the industry. And, three principles emerged, taking a look at, okay, what are some things that organizations can do? And everyone's touched on these things, so far. It's, organizations need to focus on and empower individual progress. They need to deepen empathy from, human insights. Empathy is a word we haven't said yet, but in terms of better understanding this new world that people have been operating in, we need to get to know it better. And then by the way, the third principle is, partnership, to foster a linked and shared ownership across an organization around employee experience. And so that's, IT, HR, and real estate, kind of coming together to shape, that whole employee experience.
Yeah, and I think that's important, that notion of partnership across the organization. You can't just do it with a siloed approach. IT can't work on its own, or, the different business units. But Shweta, I'd be interested to get your perspective, for organizations, leading on from what Chris was talking about around guiding principles, for organizations that are looking to start out or increase their focus on employee experience, what would your advice be, and where would they start from?
Yeah, and that's such a potent question, honestly, is that I think a lot of the companies are struggling with today, right? I mean, Adobe has done a massive amount of work around what the future of work needs to look like, right? And we all know it's going to be in some form of hybrid shape, but what is that hybrid shape, right? And we've done a lot of work in terms of even defining the personas, right? We have somebody who's a homebody, who's completely comfortable being home and then working from home all the time. And then we have innovators and engineers who are just waiting to get back and have that collaboration that they're missing out on. And then there are people like right in between, right? And be amazed around, how in between people are from a global perspective, from the jobs that they have perspective, right? Be it in finance or HR or IT or hardcore engineering jobs or frontline workers, right? Who we expect them to be at work. So a lot of work has happened in this, and I have to say where we're leading towards definitely is that it is going to be some sort of combination of giving them the flexibility to do what is best working out for them, and at the same time, how do you keep the culture intact? I think that is the struggle, is that, you want to make sure that when a new hire comes on board, right, that they are feeling the sense of culture that has been seeped in for somebody who's been working there for 25 years and understands how it works, right? How is the networking happening? How's the collaboration going to work? And so some of those things are front and center for us. But we do know that flexibility is, I think, going to be the key going forward.
Yeah. I do want to go back to one thing you said, when looking at where do organizations begin. And I like the fact that you started with personas and understanding people. I think too often when we think about designing an employee experience, we immediately jump to what new technology could be used, or how can we change the office, when we don't really know what the people need. We're not talking to the people. We can't let IT guys or facility guys or even HR, to be honest with you, define what I need as an individual in a given organization. So I like that notion of focusing on defining and understanding the personas that exist within your organization, taking the time to really understand who they are, what their roles are, what they need to be successful, and then building on that. I think that's definitely an important thing. And then obviously there's other elements that come into it, like
yeah.
Well.
And the listening strategy, as we call it, has been seeped in, at our very core, right? So we do want to hear, and we've done some massive surveys around what is it that the employees are looking for. Now, remember also that pandemic has its own curve, right? So depending on where the pandemic is at that point of time globally, those survey results have varied. And so it's really important to also understand sort of the context, but at the same time, then the best practices around what everybody else is thinking about, the peer groups, et cetera. There's a ton of work there.
That's right. Mike, your thoughts?
I think thinking about the benefits, actually, and communicating the benefits is absolutely key. And to me, that's particularly important. So it could be, well, we're going to free up time to enable you to get a better home-life balance, or we're going to take away some of those admin tasks you don't like and allow you to focus on the work that you want to do. So I think clearly communicate the benefits to the workforce to get buy-in around your strategy and approach. I think it very much comes back to what Shweta said around persona and what we call journey mapping. And it's about defining that starting point, and not everybody does start from the same point. And so that's really important to think about, and to think about the fact that we need a people-centric experience, a person-centric experience. In Fujitsu, we've been looking at this concept called a minimum viable experience. So we've all heard about minimum viable products that we use for developing apps, but actually, what does a minimum viable experience look like? And then when you've defined that, you can then maybe try and pilot it, and that enables you to take your vision, to do some of the empathy that was indicated by Chris, some definition, some ideation, a minimum viable experience, and then a pilot. And I think thinking about that entire journey for the individuals and the roles within your organization is really important in terms of really defining what your strategy is. But coming back to my original point, we need to get buy-in around this. If we're rolling out new technology, for example, employees may have concern that we're perhaps using analytics or starting to gather data about where they are and how they're working, and there could be concerns around that. So we need to communicate in a way that people are comfortable with the technology, don't feel threatened, but see the benefit in terms of enabling them to do their work and to drive a better home-life balance for them as well.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, and it sort of leads into our next question, where we've all talked about employee experience not just being one thing. It's not just culture or physical environment and communications. There's a role that technology has to play as well. And one of the things we've been talking about is that we need to start with the people. And so I think, given that we're all sort of coming from technology companies, one of the things I wanted to get some feedback on, and Mike, we'll start with you here, is how do we ensure that IT teams are actually taking the time to put people first, and not just saying, hey, this is a cool new technology, we have to deploy this? And how do we put people at the forefront of designing a solution?
Yeah, and for me, Safi, it's all about communication and the IT department reaching out to the different organizations. And that's going to be facilities management, it's going to be human resources, it's going to be the operational managers within the business, and it's going to be the exec team as well. And there's lots of areas that need to be looked at and considered in those conversations when we're looking at how we develop the right technology employee experience. And that could be the development of systems to create a safe and flexible working environment, the support of employee well-being, technology to support easier collaboration, to understand digital presence, to know where people are, if they're happy to be contacted, which we've already touched on. Automation of admin tasks and AI to help filter and prioritize workload. And then we can look at analytics, IT-based analytics that can help us drive the best possible IT experience, and workplace analytics to help us work more efficiently and effectively, giving us feedback and helping us achieve a better work-life balance. And when we look at how to achieve those things, we can see that the IT department has to move away from just infrastructure and actually look at digital technology and how it impacts the individuals at the coalface, if that makes sense.
No, that's right. That's right. Shweta?
Yeah, and interestingly, at least at Adobe, our employee experience team actually is our HR and facilities team. So we're consolidated and report up to the chief people officer, and so we have a little bit of an advantage because we're already starting to talk the same language there, and then very closely partner with our digital workplace experience team, which sits in IT. But I do feel like, and I think this is happening more and more now, is approaches like design thinking, right, where you are partnering with the consumer who's actually going to uptake that technology at the end of the day, right? Making sure, completely agree with you, Mark, the communication, the transparency. Again, Adobe's done a fantastic job, I believe, in continuing to keep their employees front and center, but also making sure that none of this is as a surprise to them, right? Being completely transparent to them in terms of where the future is going, and then also acknowledging and I love this, that we don't have all the answers, right? These are unprecedented times, right? We're all in this together, but we're also figuring it out together. And so it's okay to have more pilots, or, sort of learn and then improve, and then kind of move forward, right? I mean, as long as you're transparent with your employees, they get it. And they understand that.
No, that's right. And I like that you sort of raised sort of that role of design thinking as well. I think we've all sort of, over the last few questions, talked about personas and journeys and things like that. And I think, that's been something, as employee experience has been rising in recent years, and as a priority, we've seen design thinking being adopted as well. And so just following on from that, it sounds like design thinking is an approach, Shweta, that you guys are using internally to really guide the IT teams and other teams as well?
Yep, I would definitely say that. And again, it's not because of the pandemic or COVID, right? I mean, we've always had that approach. I think some of what COVID or the pandemic has done is it has catapulted some of the discussions that were sort of, in the pipeline or on the roadmap, right? And so now it's good that and one other thing that it has done, as I said, right, it has brought in the workplace technology teams, the workforce technology team, which is what I represent, and the digital workplace experience teams in a very sort of tight knit. Like, we know we've got to solve for all of this, and the employee experience sort of is in the middle. So we almost think of us as a triangle, or almost like a fence around that employee experience. And the goal for everybody is that seamless, personalized employee experience.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Chris, your thoughts? IT teams focusing on people, design thinking?
Absolutely. So, we, as part of our research too, I mean, we actually back this with data. In fact, we separated the advanced organizations. I talked earlier about maturity from, those that are less advanced or learners, whatever the pejorative that you might want to use. But what really set the advanced organizations apart were they were more likely, and when I say more likely, like 60 points or more likely to take, take on some human-centric activities. They were more likely to be measuring and analyzing experiences with devices and applications. But to Shweta's point, those advanced organizations were also, far more likely, like 60 points or more, were likely to be using things like iterative processes like design thinking, thinking about personas and segments of their workforce, personalization, engaging in employee journey mapping. And I think, for an IT, pro or an IT organization, I mean, there are more advanced practices, out there, but it can also be a very simple, quick start. Sit down with an employee, or talk. It's a little bit harder now, but find some sort of way to directly communicate with an employee. Ask them about their experience. I think oftentimes we're, IT is flying blind. One of Safi and I's colleagues, he used this, a great term, the silent sufferers. And, there are so many employees right now that, IT, we tend to rely on help desk tickets, a lot to say, like, how are things going? Look at my ticket data. Well, oftentimes we're looking at something, we're going to miss the silent sufferers who aren't, necessarily, maybe they're so frustrated they're not calling in, or they're not logging a ticket. And what it leaves IT with is these watermelon SLAs, where things might even look green on the outside, like a watermelon, but once you cut inside and dig a little deeper, that there's actually a lot of red and some pain that they might not be seeing. Just underscoring the importance of all of this.
Watermelons. I've never heard that analogy.
Watermelon SLAs.
Green on the outside looks all good, and red on the inside. I like that, Chris.
Yeah.
Mike, your perspective. I know Fujitsu, does a lot of work around design thinking and human-centered design. Is this a way that IT teams can help really focus on the needs of people, not just the needs of IT?
Yes, absolutely, and it's absolutely key for IT to understand the issues and the roles and the personas, as we mentioned earlier on. And then, I think IT can get involved in helping support getting feedback around around what's happening with employee experience. So one of the areas that we've been looking at specifically over the last couple of years has been that of end user analytics, so that we can make sure that we're driving a great IT experience for the end users. And also, some of us aren't really sure what good looks like and what the definition of good is. So somehow, if we can give individuals a benchmark or a score against their experience, and then they can strive for a better experience. And so that gives them some way of normalizing it and perceiving what their experience is like. Something that we've also seen from our IT department that they've introduced quite recently is around microfeedback. So when somebody raises a trouble ticket, for example, at the end of that trouble ticket, they can access a piece of software which is called Happy Signals, and that allows them to give some feedback instantaneously. So that microfeedback. So rather than, I think, giving end users sort of long and lengthy surveys around feedback, the opportunity to kind of occasionally give feedback just by clicking a smiley face or not so smiley face and writing a few words about how they feel is also particularly key. I think one area for me, and this is quite experimental, and this might be something that I've spoken to Chris about in the past, is actually looking at monitoring the anxiety and stress of individuals in the workplace. And I'm working with some innovative technology which can measure physiological data. So what we're doing is we're looking at how we can harvest data in real time from something like a smartwatch, which I'm wearing at the moment, and it's currently collecting data. And we look at different physiological signs such as heart rate variability as an indicator of stress in the workplace. And then the idea is we can give individuals feedback and coaching about how to manage their anxiety. And the whole point here is to create awareness around well-being and prevent the escalation of anxiety to the point where it becomes disruptive. So I think there's lots of ways that technology can help give us some feedback around employee experience. But coming back to Chris's point around just the people elements of it, one simple way that we're doing this within our organization at the moment is simply having coffee clubs. So that doesn't really involve very much technology at all. It involves everybody dialing into a call and just sharing their experiences and talking and just putting that time aside to know we've got an hour together, we can relax, we can have a cup of coffee. If it's later in the day, we can possibly even have a beer, and we can just kind of shoot the breeze and relax and talk about our experience and share our stories. And I think that's also really beneficial to the feedback that we can get around the experience.
Yeah, so I think definitely from what you're saying and everyone else has said, it really sounds like it comes down to communication, like talking to people, understanding their needs and moving on from there. I do feel that I think one of the next key things around it, once you've designed it, you're trying to improve employee experiences, how do you measure it? And how do you make sure you don't have an employee experience watermelon, as Chris would say, where it all looks good on the outside and you've got your top line scores looking positive, but really inside there's some things where, as you said, Chris, there's some silent sufferers out there, people that aren't happy with some things, but they're not really talking up. So maybe Shweta, we'll start with you. I mean, how do you measure employee experience? Is there a defined way to do it, or what can you do to start there?
Right. And, I think it does start with establishing some KPIs, right? Where is it that you're looking to move the needle or even to measure the needle, right? Because you can't hit every single, I go back to my ice cream analogy, right? I mean, it is going to be so varied, and somebody's going to want it in a cup, and somebody's going to want it in a cone, and somebody's going to double scoop, and the flavors, right, is going to be different. So you have to pick and choose what matters to your organization, and it depends on where your organization is in the organization's journey itself, right? What employee experiences you want to establish as your KPIs, and then I think from there, I absolutely believe that you can have various workforce analytics and workplace analytics, and insights that you need to drive to measure on those KPIs, right? I mean, if you're a startup company and your employee experience is getting the laptop in your new employees' hands so they can get going, then that's your KPI. And if you're a company that's looking to make sure that the culture is important, then that becomes the KPI. So it does vary. And I don't think there is a silver bullet there either. So you have to figure out what works for your organization, for your people.
No, that's right. That's right. Chris?
I would add, I'm going to build on what Shweta was talking about and actually pick up something she talked about earlier, which are around employee listening. So not necessarily measuring, but also, taking action. And, one of the things, in the research, we have there is, what we would call more of the anatomy of an effective listening function. And talk about it in terms like a triage of layers where throughout this discussion we've been talking about, okay, we can gather some top level signal, and they might be from a benchmark survey or some sort of pulse survey, more frequent pulse survey we're conducting. But then you need to kind of peel back and do some sort of refinement. A financial services organization, big investment firm spoke with, they even pilot virtual anonymous focus groups where they have say 50 people in a single session, and it's a rapid pointed way to kind of zero in on some of the things that are salient, get targeted feedback. But picking up, and by the way, Shweta, I'm going to definitely have some ice cream tonight. You just totally made me hungry, built a craving. But there's that validation and prioritization, because we can't do everything. And say, even in the same way that we, refine, you can also collect and, do some validation, prioritization, so you can really pick the most important things to do. But kind of rounding that out and then, kind of closing the loop is just having that kind of feedback loop. You got to continually gather feedback so you can continue to shape solutions. And it's also important to kind of gather that feedback as well and be vocal about it, because you're also demonstrating to employee, hey, we listened to you earlier, here's what we did, what do you think? They're knowing that you're not just sending surveys out and they're just flying into the circular file, that they're the organization's actually doing something and taking action on their word.
Yeah. And I think I just want to jump in on something you said there, Chris, which I think is incredibly important and we don't do enough of, is not just finding out what people need before you start designing the solution or the refined process, whatever it may be, but checking in after. I think too often as an organization, we're in such a hurry to complete the project, get it done on time, on budget, throw it over the fence and said, here you go, and just assume, well, aren't you happy now? We're not actually doing that checking to see, did we get it right? Is there opportunities for refinement? And I think that's just as important as talking to the people in the beginning is talking to the people at the end to see, have you actually hit the mark or not? Mike, what's your thoughts? I think you did touch on, some quite progressive and innovative ways to collect data on and measure aspects of employee experience. Is there some approach that Fujitsu take?
I don't think there's a single approach that we take. One area where I've been experimenting is trying to roll out well-being technology. So we touched on anxiety measuring, which is really experimental, and we haven't rolled that out yet. We have developed a well-being app, and the concept of that is that it provides quite an informal way for individuals to give feedback about their day. So they can just log on to the app. It's not actually a work system effectively, because they access it through their smartphone, and they can give an indication of how they're feeling. And what we do is we buddy people up. So the app is called Buddy Connect. And so it allows an individual to reach out to their buddy to give an indication of their well-being status. And then if the buddy gets concerned that that's looking particularly negative, the opportunity there is for the buddy to reach out and to see if they can provide some help and support. Interestingly, I've expanded that to support remote workers, so that actually a manager can monitor their team. So they can be indicating, or their team can indicate on their traffic light indicator what their well-being status is. And then the nice thing about that is that as a manager working with a remote team, sometimes it's you're not sure if you ought to get in touch with somebody. Do I want to call somebody every day to check they're all right? Do I ping them every day? Is that too much? Whereas actually what the app does, it allows managers to look at the status of individuals, and then if they see things perhaps going negatively, they can then reach out and make the connection there or then. But one of the really interesting things about this is that once you've rolled this out across a broader population, is that you can look at the information in an anonymized way, so you can't tie it back to an individual, but you can get an idea of the pulse of your organization. You can look at the well-being statistics across the workforce and understand what that's like between different geographies, between different departments, between different times of day even. And I think this is going to be an interesting area of development of technology around employee experience, which allows us to get a deeper insight into the organization without it being too intrusive, if that makes sense. So that's just one area where we've been doing some innovation, Safi, and it's been really interesting, and I've started to roll that out both within Fujitsu but also with some clients as well. And actually, interestingly enough, I've just been doing some work with Citrix to surface Buddy Connect flows in Citrix Workspace using micro apps, and so we're currently doing some experimentation with that, so you can actually see those signals on your desktop as well as on the app on the phone. So that's just another really interesting area for us at the moment.
Now, so it sounds like you're already sort of starting to plan out what some of these future employee experiences could look like. I mean, and this sort of gets me to our final topic of discussion is, thinking about what the future of employee experience looks like and some of the lessons that we've learned from last year. How do we sort of move forward with our thinking around employee experience strategies?
I think from my perspective, employee experience will clearly continue to evolve, and it very much needs to adapt and change as well to the work environment. So flexibility is going to be absolutely key to the way that we work moving forward. And at the moment, I'm starting to speak to our customers about return to office. I'm based in the UK, and the view is that probably in the summer, we're going to start to receive return to office activities, but nobody really knows what that looks like. And what they need is flexibility to be able to manage the resources around the office environment, to make sure that they're safe, and to make sure that the environment is resilient for the people. So for me, that's a really interesting topic at the moment. And I think organizations are going to be very guarded against the potential future pandemics as well, and the impact they could have on the workplace and employee experience moving forward. I think we're going to see an enhanced focus on safety and well-being, but actually that will include further integration into our physical workspace with digital technology, because we're going to need to be able to monitor that environment more closely, and that's partly to make sure it's safe, but partly to make sure that we can understand things like presence. So speaking to a customer last week, they said return to office in the summer means that they're going to have to take out 2/3 of the desk space in order to make sure that they have safe distancing within the work environment. However, when people return to the office, what stops everybody turning up to the office on the same day? So we need some digital tools to help us manage that, and to help us understand that environment and manage that environment. And so that flexibility and that integration with the physical workspace becomes important for our digital systems. And I think we're going to see more focus around sustainability and hitting sustainability goals as part of employee experience as well. And I think that organizations are going to be targeted more in that way, as well as individuals. And I think organizations or individuals are going to want to work for organizations that have got great sustainability credentials. And that's going to generate a great feeling about the company and an employee experience. And probably the final area for me where I'm doing some research at the moment is actually around enhanced security I guess protection of personal data. Because one thing that is a recurring topic for me at the moment is that we're certainly talking about end user analytics, we're talking about workplace analytics, I'm talking about technology that's measuring physiological data, and there's nothing that gets more personal than your heartbeat, I can assure you. So employees are going to want to understand that if we're harvesting that data and we're using that data, that it's protected and they can control how it's used. And I've been looking at some interesting technology around things like personal data stores and blockchain to help better protect our sensitive data. And I think that's all going to be part of the broader environment around employee experience. We want to feel safe and we want to feel secure in the workplace environment.
No, that's right. Look, I mean, I think there's certainly a lot of interesting approaches that we're seeing people take from the use of technology and data to help not just capture insights into what employees are doing, but actually help them do better and provides some of the same, I guess, conveniences that we get from consumer technology in the workplace as well. So certainly some interesting things there. Shweta, your perspective, the future of employee experience and what are some of the lessons that we can take into building our future employee experience strategies?
Yeah, and Mark, like lots of good insights there based on what you said. Very similar to how we've been thinking about it. I mean, we know it's going to be hybrid. I think the challenge is going to be knowing that it is not that everybody's coming to work all the time. Right now, it's a little bit easier to collaborate because everybody's remote, and so then to find that right balance of when are your senior directors and your VPs in-house, and then they're coming in, and does that mean that I have to go when they're coming in, or do I have to go when my colleagues are coming in, right? So the visibility around who's going to be where is going to be super helpful, right? And some sort of norms and guiding principles would also be helpful, right? Hey, you're there for team events, right? I mean, again, the pendulum is all the way from, hey, I don't want to come to work at all, to, hey, I'd like to come to work for 5 days a week, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
What does that look like? And I think also just being in HR, even though I'm HR technology, right, I think it is also critical, as Mark said, right, safety, obviously, and the well-being, with the security and the data that we are collecting from individuals, knowing that there's GDPR and then there's CCPA, right? We want to make sure that the employee feels secure about providing the data of where they are physically located, or about their own well-being as well, right? So those are some of the considerations for sure for the future. I'd also say that, and I mentioned persona work, earlier on. I think the future of work and the employee experience space is going to heavily depend on, again, what your employees are looking for and what are the journeys and the moments that matter to them. So I think it sort of kind of goes full circle. Is in the future, we will have to acknowledge and understand where they are and then what is important to them for that moment that they are in, right? And then base that employee experience on that.
Absolutely. And I think that really is then going to impact, we've heard about the term, the war on talent, and people fighting to hire and recruit and retain people. And I think now people have a reason to either stay or leave, especially when it comes to how an organization embraces this new way of working. Is my organization going to let me continue to work remotely or force me to come back to the office? And maybe I don't want to come back to the office. Maybe I don't feel safe because, things haven't settled down in the location. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think, that whole notion of war on talent is probably going to really heat up based on how organizations are going to build their employee experience strategies going forward, how they're going to shape what a return to work strategy looks like. Chris, final thoughts from you around the future of employee experience?
Definitely. So I would actually, just say, because we were going to have a very diverse audience listening to this, that there's no linear path, because I spoke about maturity earlier. And I think what organizations, will see is that there's no necessarily linear path here. And, you might have advanced practices around culture and physical space, but you might lag in the digital space, that Shweta spoke about earlier. I've been researching employee experience for, quite some time, and I've yet to encounter, I don't think there exists an organization that's neared perfection in every area. And so that makes every company's journey unique. So just in terms of what you do, I think, but by the way, and then, we're also seeing some macro in terms of the future of employee experience. I mean, there's a lot of macro trends going around about, how, shifts in labor and how companies hire, that might not be like primary employees, or, more salient, the advances in automation, are really going to have an impact on, people's sense of safety and productivity and, everything that we've been talking about. But, that was really the focus of our research. If we can focus on, fostering individual progress, developing empathy and partnership, those three things, there's a set of actions that we can take that really kind of change the way a company operates, from, the services, governance, culture, technology roadmap, a lot of different ways we can change.
Yeah. I think just to sort of bring it all back together, I think everything that you guys have talked about really, for me, sort of comes back to the person and the human factor. And while we talk about the role that technology and the physical workplace and tools and processes can build, all of you in your sort of summary comments are really focused on safety and well-being. And I think that's at what the heart of employee experience is. It's about the person and not about what IT needs or facilities and things like that. And I think that's probably the best place for everyone to start by thinking about your people. So with that, I want to thank you for attending this episode of the New Workspace, and thank you, Shweta, Chris, and Mike, for joining us. And I really enjoyed the conversation. I think we could talk for probably another hour, especially when we started talking about watermelons and ice cream. But for everyone watching, remember to register below for the next episode, where we're going to focus on digital wellness and how to avoid burnout in a digital age, where we'll discuss everything about the role of remote working, burnout, engagement, and digital wellness as well. Bye for now.